Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into Mark chapter 3.
Yeah, this chapter really throws us into the deep end. You see Jesus' ministry gaining momentum, but also the opposition really starts to solidify.
Right. It kicks off immediately with conflict, doesn't it? In a synagogue.
Exactly. There's a man there with a shriveled hand, and the focus isn't just on him or Jesus, but on the people watching.
People watching with not the best intentions, it sounds like.
Not at all. Mark's pretty explicit. He says they were watching, looking for a reason to accuse him. Specifically, would he heal on the Sabbath day?
So it feels like a test. A trap, maybe.
It certainly reads that way. They weren't concerned about the man's suffering, more about catching Jesus breaking their rules.
And Jesus doesn't shy away from it. He calls the man right out, tells him to stand up in front of everyone.
A very public move. Then he turns it back on them. Asks that piercing question. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?
Puts them right on the spot.
Yeah.
And their reaction.
Complete silence. Mark says they remained silent. It's quite a moment.
In the text, Stephen tells us how Jesus felt about that silence.
It does, which is fascinating. It mentions his anger and that he was deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. You really feel the emotional weight there, his compassion versus their rigidity.
That's powerful. And then, despite their silence, despite their motives, he acts.
He does. He tells the man, stretch out your hand. The man obeys, and Mark says the hand was completely restored, just like that. An undeniable miracle.
Undeniable, but it doesn't win over his critics, does it? What's the immediate fallout?
It's swift and severe. The Pharisees, Mark says, went out immediately, and they start plotting with the Herodians groups that weren't exactly allies about how they could kill him.
Wow. So an act of healing directly leads to a conspiracy to murder. That escalates things incredibly quickly.
It shows just how threatened the establishment felt by him, by his authority and his actions, even acts of mercy.
So after that confrontation, the scene shifts a bit. Jesus withdraws.
Yeah, he heads to the lake with his disciples, maybe trying to get some space, but the crowds just follow him. And Mark really emphasizes the scale here.
It wasn't just local people from Galilee, right? He lists quite a few places.
Well, a lot of places. Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, Transjordan, even the coastal areas around Tyre and Sidon. People were traveling, like, serious distances.
Why? What was drawing them?
The text says they came because they heard of what he was doing. His actions, his healings, his teaching word was spreading like wildfire.
And the sheer number of people created logistical issues.
Oh, definitely.
Oh.
It says people with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. It sounds almost chaotic, desperate.
To the point where he needed an escape plan.
Exactly. He actually told his disciples to get a small boat ready, just in case the crowd started to crush him. It paints a picture of just how intense things were getting physically.
And amidst all this human chaos, there's another layer, the spiritual reaction.
That's right. Mark mentions that whenever evil spirits encountered him, they'd fall down and cry out, "You are the Son of God!" They recognized him instantly.
But he didn't want their testimony, did he?
No, he gave them strict orders not to tell who he was. It seems he was very much in control of how and when his identity was revealed, and certainly didn't want it coming from, demonic sources.
Okay, so we've got this rising opposition, huge crowds, demonstrations of power, and then Jesus makes a really significant organizational move.
He does. He goes up a mountainside, often a place of important encounters in the Bible, and Mark stresses that he called to him those he wanted. This wasn't random.
An intentional selection for a specific purpose.
Very specific. He appointed 12, calling them apostles. And the purpose was twofold, according to Mark, that they might be with him, so companionship and learning, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons.
So forming an inner circle, but also preparing to delegate, to expand the work, especially with the growing pressure.
Exactly. It's a foundational step, building a core team right when things are getting more complex and dangerous.
And we get the list of names.
We do. Simon, who he renames Peter, that rock. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, given that rather evocative nickname Boanerges, sons of thunder.
Intriguing name.
Isn't it? Then Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot.
And the list ends with a name that even then carried a heavy weight in the narrative.
Yes. Judas Iscariot, followed immediately by the stark note, who betrayed him. It's just woven right in there. Even at this early stage of forming the group, the eventual betrayal is already part of the story being told.
Such a foreshadowing. Okay, let's shift scenes again. Jesus is back indoors. In a house.
And again, overwhelmed by crowds, Mark makes a point of saying it was so packed, so demanding that Jesus and his disciples couldn't even eat. His ministry was all-consuming.
And this intensity reaches his family. What was their reaction?
This is quite something. When his family heard about all this commotion, the constant crowds, maybe the lack of eating, they went to take charge of him.
Take charge of him. Why?
Because, Mark says, they were saying he is out of his mind. They thought his behavior, his total dedication, was a sign of insanity.
Wow. So from his own family, accusations of madness, and at the same time, the religious authorities are leveling a different, much darker charge.
That's right. Teachers of the law who'd come down from Jerusalem, so official figures, they had a very specific accusation. They said he was possessed by Beelzebub.
Beelzebub, meaning?
Essentially Satan, or the prince of demons. They weren't just disagreeing with him, they were saying his power, the very power he used to cast out demons, came from the chief demon himself.
That's about as serious an accusation as you can make.
Yeah.
How does Jesus tackle that one?
He confronts it directly, calls them over, and uses logic, parables really. He asks, how can Satan drive out Satan?
Right, it doesn't make sense internally.
Exactly. He says a kingdom divided against itself can't stand, a house divided can't stand. So, if Satan was fighting against himself by empowering Jesus to cast out demons, well, Satan's kingdom would collapse. Their accusation is fundamentally illogical.
And then he uses that parable about the strong man.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. No one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man. He's saying, my ability to cast out demons, to plunder Satan's domain, proves I'm not working for him. It proves I've already overpowered him. It flips their accusation on its head. His power is proof of his victory over Satan, not allegiance to him.
That's a strong rebuttal. And right after this discussion about the source of his power, Mark includes this teaching about forgiveness and the unforgivable sin.
Yes, it flows directly from that confrontation. Jesus makes this incredibly broad statement first. Truly, I tell you, people can be forgiven all their sins and every slander they utter.
All sins, all slanders. That sounds all-encompassing. But then there's the exception.
There is. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. They are guilty of an eternal sin.
Now, Mark gives us a crucial piece of context here, doesn't he? He tells us why Jesus said this right at that moment.
He does, and it's vital for understanding this passage here. Mark explicitly adds, he said this because they were saying he has an evil spirit.
Ah, okay. So in this specific instance, the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is directly linked to their accusation.
Precisely. It's seeing the undeniable work of the Holy Spirit, like casting out demons, which they just witnessed, and deliberately, consciously attributing that divine power to Satan, to an evil source. It's calling the light darkness, essentially. It's not just a slip of the tongue. It seems to describe a settled, deliberate rejection of God's work when it's staring you in the face.
That context really focuses the meaning in this chapter. Okay,
Yeah.
the chapter wraps up with one more significant interaction, this time involving his family again.
Yes. While he's still teaching inside the house, surrounded by the crowd, his mother and brothers arrive. They stand outside and send someone in to get him.
And the crowd tells him, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you.
Right. And Jesus' response is, again, quite startling. He asks, who are my mother and my brothers?
It sounds almost dismissive at first glance.
It could seem that way, but then he clarifies. He looks around at the people sitting in a circle around him.
The ones listening, the ones engaging with his teaching.
Exactly. And he declares, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother.
So he's redefining family, not dismissing his biological family, perhaps, but elevating another kind of relationship.
That's how it reads. He's saying that the deepest connection, the truest family bond, is formed by shared obedience to God's will. Spiritual kinship based on shared purpose and relationship with God takes precedence even over blood ties. It's a radical realignment of priorities.
Absolutely. This chapter covers so much ground. The Sabbath healing leading to a death plot, the overwhelming crowds, the appointment of the 12, facing accusations of madness and demonic power, explaining that specific context for blasphemy against the Spirit, and finally, this profound redefinition of family.
It's a whirlwind, showing the growing stakes, Jesus' deliberate actions in response, and the core values he's establishing for his followers. Intense stuff.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Mark 3, maybe something to reflect on is that final point. What does it really mean practically, to prioritize doing God's will to the point where it becomes the defining marker of your closest relationships, even potentially redefining traditional family roles, as Jesus suggests here. Something to think about.